The massive doors of the Galactic Council building opened with a soft hiss. Jake Morrison walked through them carrying a simple briefcase and wearing a dark blue suit. His shoes made quiet clicking sounds on the smooth metal floor. Behind him walked Lisa Grant, his assistant. She had blonde hair tied back neatly and carried a data pad. The council chamber was huge. The ceiling stretched up so high that Jake could barely see the top. Around the circular room sat beings from dozens of different worlds. Some looked like giant insects with many arms. Others were made of what seemed like living crystal that sparkled in the light. A few floated in tanks of water, breathing through tubes. Jake and Lisa took their seats at the human section. The chairs were simple compared to the fancy setups other species had. The Corvan delegates sat on raised platforms that let their 6 legs hang down comfortably. The Zelthani had special stands that held their crystal bodies at the right angle to catch the room's light. The current speaker was Zeltar, a Thraxian with dark green scales and yellow eyes. He stood nearly 8 feet tall and had claws that could slice through metal. His voice boomed across the chamber as he talked about mining rights in the Kepler system. Jake listened carefully. His face showed nothing, but inside his mind was working fast. He watched how Zeltar moved, how the other delegates reacted, who nodded and who looked away. These were the same skills his great-grandfather had used when hunting deer in the forests of Montana, but now Jake used them to hunt for information. Lisa made notes on her pad. Her fingers moved quickly and quietly. She had learned long ago to watch Jake's body language. When his shoulders got slightly tighter, it meant trouble was coming. When he tilted his head just a little to the left, he was planning something. Right now, his hands were completely still on the table, which meant he was in full hunting mode. The Thraxians had been pushing harder lately. They wanted more territory, more resources, more power. Most species in the council were afraid of them. The Thraxians were big, strong, and had sharp claws and teeth. They had conquered 12 worlds before joining the council, and everyone knew it. What they did not know was that humans had conquered an entire planet long before they reached the stars. Captain Ryan Clark sat in the visitor section watching everything. He wore a simple gray uniform with no fancy decorations. His hands were scarred from years of military service, but he kept them folded calmly in his lap. Ryan had fought in the Feu, border wars, the colony rebellions, and the Mars independence conflict. He knew exactly what humans were capable of when pushed too far. The funny thing was that most aliens thought humans were weak. They saw Jake's polite smile and quiet voice and thought he was harmless. They saw Lisa's careful notes and neat appearance and assumed she was just a secretary. They looked at Ryan's plain uniform and thought he was probably some low-level security officer. They had no idea they were looking at apex predators. Jake's ancestors had chased woolly mammoths across frozen plains for days without stopping. They had learned to work together in groups, to plan attacks that took hours or even days to complete. They had developed the patience to wait in hiding for the perfect moment to strike. Most importantly, they had learned to kill creatures much bigger and stronger than themselves. The Thraxians finished their presentation and sat down. Their leader, General Vex Salicor, looked around the room with confidence. His yellow eyes passed over the human section without much interest. To him, Jake and Lisa were just another pair of weak aliens who would eventually bow to Thraxian power. The council moderator called for responses. Several species spoke up with concerns about Thraxian expansion. The Kelvani delegates squeaked nervously about protecting trade routes. The deep dwellers gurgled something about underwater mining rights through their breathing apparatus. Then Jake stood up. He moved slowly, calmly, like he had all the time in the world. This was another hunting instinct that humans had kept from their early days. Good hunters never rushed. They waited for exactly the right moment, and then moved with deadly precision. "Honored Council," Jake said in his quiet voice. "The human delegation would like to address some concerns about resource allocation in the disputed territories." His words were polite and formal, exactly what everyone expected from human diplomats. But Ryan Clark noticed something else. Jake's stance was balanced, ready to move in any direction instantly. His hands hung loose at his sides, but his fingers were slightly curved like he was getting ready to grab something. His eyes never left General Salicor's face. Lisa stood up next to him. To most observers, she looked like she was just there to support her boss. But Ryan saw how she positioned herself to cover Jake's left side. He saw how her free hand stayed close to the emergency communicator on her belt. He recognized the way she scanned the room, checking exits and identifying potential threats. They looked like diplomats, but they moved like a hunting pack. Jake began speaking about trade agreements and peaceful cooperation. His voice never got louder or more aggressive. He used complicated diplomatic language that took forever to say simple things. The other delegates relaxed a little. This was the kind of boring human speech they were used to. But General Salicor was starting to feel uncomfortable, and he did not know why. Something about the way Jake looked at him made his scales itch. The human's eyes never blinked, never looked away, never showed any emotion at all. It reminded him of something, but he could not figure out what. It reminded him of being hunted. Jake talked for exactly 12 minutes. He covered every point the Thraxians had raised and offered reasonable solutions to each problem. He suggested compromise positions that would give everyone something they wanted. He spoke about the importance of working together for the good of all species. When he finished, the chamber was quiet. Several delegates nodded approvingly. The human approach to problems was always so sensible, so peaceful. This was why humans were such good mediators between other species. Jake sat back down and folded his hands on the table. General Salicor tried to shake off the strange feeling the human had given him. There was nothing threatening about Jake Morrison. He was just another weak alien who solved problems with words instead of claws. The session ended an hour later. As delegates began filing out of the chamber, General Salicor approached the human section. He wanted to test these weak creatures, to see how they reacted to a real warrior species. "Ambassador Morrison," he said in his booming voice, "your words are very pretty, but words do not control territory. Strength controls territory." Jake looked up at the towering Thraxian and smiled politely. "You're absolutely right, General. Strength is what matters in the end." For a moment, General Salicor felt pleased. Finally, a human who understood reality. Then Jake stood up. He was still much smaller than the Thraxian general. His suit was still perfectly neat, his voice still quiet and polite. But something had changed. The air around him felt different, heavier somehow. His smile was exactly the same. But now it reminded General Salicor of something he had seen on predator animals back on his homeworld. "The strong do what they can," Jake said softly. "The weak suffer what they must. It's one of the oldest truths in the universe." Lisa stepped up beside Jake. Captain Ryan Clark moved closer from the visitor section. Around the chamber, other humans began converging on their location. They all moved casually, like they were just saying hello to colleagues. But their positioning was perfect, cutting off escape routes and controlling the space around the Thraxian delegation. General Salicor suddenly realized that he was surrounded by apex predators who had been pretending to be sheep. His warrior instincts, which had been silent around the harmless humans, suddenly screamed danger warnings. Jake's smile never wavered. "I'm sure we can find a peaceful solution to any territorial disputes, General. After all, we humans prefer to solve problems with words rather than violence. It's so much more civilized, don't you think?" The words were perfectly diplomatic. The tone was absolutely terrifying. General Salicor backed away slowly, his survival instincts finally recognizing what his mind had missed. These were not weak creatures to be bullied. These were something far more dangerous than any warrior species he had ever encountered. These were predators who had learned to hunt with patience instead of claws, with intelligence instead of strength, and with cooperation instead of individual violence. They were apex predators who had evolved beyond the need to show their teeth until the moment they chose to bite. As the Thraxian delegation left the chamber quickly, Jake straightened his tie and picked up his briefcase. Lisa gathered her notes with the same calm efficiency she always showed. Captain Clark returned to his seat in the visitor section. To any observer, nothing unusual had happened. The humans had simply engaged in normal diplomatic conversation with another species. But word would spread through the galaxy's intelligence networks within hours. The humans were not what they seemed. And that realization would change everything. 3 weeks had passed since the tense meeting at the Galactic Council. Now Commander Beth Taylor stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station, watching ships come and go through the massive docking bays. The station was huge, built like a giant wheel spinning slowly in space. Traders from dozens of worlds stopped here to buy, sell, and refuel. Beth had been stationed here for 2 years. She was responsible for inspecting human merchant ships and making sure they followed galactic trade laws. It was supposed to be a quiet job, the kind they gave to officers who wanted a break from military life. Beth had served on 3 different warships before requesting this transfer. She told everyone she was tired of conflict and wanted peace. That was not entirely true. Beth walked through the station's main corridor, nodding politely to the various aliens she passed. A group of Kelvani traders chittered nervously as they discussed cargo prices. These beings looked like large otters that walked on 2 legs and had soft brown fur. They were some of the most peaceful creatures in the galaxy, more interested in making fair trades than fighting wars. Near the food court, several deep dwellers moved slowly in their water-filled mobility suits. These fish-like beings needed to stay wet at all times, so they wore clear tanks that let them breathe and move around dry stations. They were brilliant mathematicians and often worked as accountants for trading companies. Station manager Alex Stone met Beth at the central hub. Alex was a tall man with gray hair and calm blue eyes. He had been running Kepler Station for 5 years, and everyone respected his fair treatment of all species. What most people did not know was that Alex had been a colonel in the Earth Defense Forces before taking this civilian job. "We have a problem," Alex said quietly as they walked toward his office. Long-range sensors picked up a Thraxian warship heading this way. Should arrive in about 4 hours. Beth felt something tighten in her chest. "Which ship?" "The Deathclaw. General Salicor's flagship." Beth nodded slowly. She remembered reading reports about that ship. It was massive, heavily armed, and had been used to conquer 6 different worlds before the Thraxians joined the Galactic Council. The name was not chosen by accident. Alex's office overlooked the main docking bay. Through the large windows they could see dozens of ships from many different species. Most were small trading vessels or passenger transports. None of them had serious weapons or military shields. If the Thraxians wanted to cause trouble, there was nothing here that could stop them. "Have you contacted the council?" Beth asked. "I sent a message 2 hours ago. Got back a standard reply about monitoring the situation and taking appropriate diplomatic action." Alex's voice was flat. "In other words, they'll send a strongly worded letter if something bad happens." Beth looked out at the peaceful scene below. Alien families walked together through the shopping areas. Children of different species played games in the recreation zones. Everyone felt safe here because Kepler Station was neutral territory, protected by galactic law, but laws only worked when people chose to follow them. 4 hours later, the Deathclaw arrived. The Thraxian warship was 3 times bigger than any other vessel in the area. Its dark metal hull was covered with weapon, ports, and armor plating. It moved slowly toward the station like a predator approaching its prey. The smaller ships in the area quickly moved out of its way. General Salicor came aboard with 20 of his warriors. They were all huge, scaled beings with claws and sharp teeth. Each one carried weapons that could cut through metal. They walked through the station like they owned it, pushing smaller beings out of their way. Alex met them at the main airlock. He wore his best diplomatic smile and spoke in the calm, respectful tone that humans were famous for throughout the galaxy. "General Salicor, welcome to Kepler Station. How can we help you today?" The general looked down at Alex with yellow eyes that showed no warmth. "We are here to collect tribute payments from several worlds in this sector. Some of their representatives are currently on your station." "I see," Alex said carefully. Of course, all beings here are under the protection of galactic law. Any business discussions would need to follow proper legal procedures." General Salicor's mouth opened slightly, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Thraxian law is the only law that matters in Thraxian space." "This is neutral territory," Alex replied, still smiling politely. "All species have equal rights here." Around the docking bay, humans began moving into position. It looked casual, like they were just going about their normal duties. But Beth noticed how they spread out to cover all the exits. She saw how they kept their hands free and their bodies balanced. Most importantly, she saw how they watched each other, communicating with tiny gestures that most aliens would miss. It was pack behavior. Pure and simple. The confrontation moved to the main plaza, where General Salakor had demanded to meet with the Kelvani trade delegation. The otter-like beings huddled together in fear as the massive Thraxian loomed over them. Their leader, a female named Whisper of Wind, tried to explain that they had already paid all required fees according to galactic law. Galactic law means nothing, General Salakor growled. You will pay Thraxian tribute or face the consequences. The crowd of mixed species watched nervously. This was exactly the kind of situation the Galactic Council was supposed to prevent. But the Council was far away and General Salakor was here now. Whisper of Wind looked around desperately for help. Her large dark eyes filled with tears as she realized that no one could protect her people from the Thraxian warriors. The general raised one clawed hand, ready to strike her as an example to the others. That was when everything changed. Beth Taylor stepped forward. Her movement was smooth and casual, like she was just walking over to join the conversation. But anyone who understood predator behavior would have recognized the approach pattern. She was not running toward the Thraxians. She was stalking them. Excuse me, General, Beth said in her polite voice. I think there might be some confusion about jurisdiction here. General Salakor turned to look at her. Beth was much smaller than him, wearing a simple uniform with no visible weapons. To him, she looked like just another weak human who could be easily intimidated. There is no confusion, he snarled. Stand aside or be removed. Beth's smile never changed, but something shifted in her posture. Her weight moved slightly forward onto the balls of her feet. Her hands, which had been hanging relaxed at her sides, curved slightly like she was getting ready to grab something. Her breathing became slower and deeper. Around the plaza, other humans began moving closer. Alex Stone appeared from one direction, walking with the same smooth, purposeful stride. 3 human merchants approached from another angle, their trading smiles replaced by something much more focused. A maintenance worker put down his tools and started walking toward the group. None of them were running, none of them were shouting or making threats. But their coordinated movement sent a clear message to anyone who knew how to read it. The pack was gathering. General Salakor felt something he had not experienced in years. His warrior instincts, trained through generations of combat, were sending him warning signals. But his logical mind could not understand why. These humans looked harmless. They were smaller, weaker, and had no visible weapons. But something about the way they moved made his scales itch with nervous energy. General, Alex Stone said, his voice still perfectly diplomatic. I'm sure we can resolve this situation peacefully. After all, Kepler Station has always been a place where different species work together for mutual benefit. The words were reasonable, but the tone carried undertones that made everyone in the plaza feel like the artificial gravity had gotten heavier. It was the voice of a creature that was used to being obeyed without question. Beth took another step forward. Now she was within arm's reach of the general. Her head barely came up to his chest, but somehow she seemed to fill more space than her small body should allow. The Kelvani delegation is under the protection of station security, she said quietly. I'm afraid I can't allow any unauthorized enforcement actions in this area. Her hand moved to rest on the communication device at her belt. It was a casual gesture, but General Salakor's eyes tracked the movement like it was a weapon being drawn. His survival instincts were screaming at him now, even though his mind could not understand why. Around him, more humans had gathered. They stood in a loose circle, still maintaining polite expressions and non-threatening postures. But their positioning was perfect. Every exit was covered. Every angle of attack was blocked. They had surrounded his entire group without seeming to move aggressively at all. For the first time in his military career, General Salakor found himself taking a step backward. The humans were not acting like prey animals cornered by predators. They were acting like predators who had cornered their prey and were deciding whether or not to attack. "This is not over," he growled, trying to regain his authority. "The Thraxian Empire will not forget this insult." Alex Stone's smile grew slightly wider. "Of course not, General. We wouldn't expect you to forget. After all, memory is such an important survival trait, don't you think?" The threat was delivered in perfectly polite diplomatic language, but everyone in the plaza understood it clearly. The humans were not afraid of Thraxian revenge. They were looking forward to it. Captain Nina Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the exploration ship New Horizon, staring at the signal on her screen. The distress call had been broadcasting for 3 days from an uncharted system at the edge of known space. The message was simple and desperate. "Help us, they are killing everyone, please help." Nina had been exploring unknown regions for 8 years. She had discovered 12 new star systems and made first contact with 6 different species. Her crew trusted her judgment completely, which was why they followed her orders without question when she changed course toward the distress signal. The New Horizon was not a warship. It was built for science and exploration, with advanced sensors and laboratories instead of weapons. The crew of 45 included scientists, diplomats, and engineers. They were supposed to make peaceful contact with new species and gather information about unexplored worlds. Dr. Kevin Hayes worked in the main laboratory, studying samples from their last discovery. Kevin was a quiet man who loved learning about alien life forms. He had written 3 books about xenobiology and won awards for his research. Kevin believed that all intelligent life was precious and should be protected. That belief was about to be tested in ways he never imagined. When they reached the source of the distress signal, Nina ordered full sensor sweeps of the system. What they found made her hands shake as she read the reports. There were 2 ships in the area. One was clearly damaged and drifting without power. The other was much larger and appeared to be intact. The larger ship was like nothing in any galactic database. It was dark gray and covered with strange extensions that looked almost organic. Parts of it seemed to pulse like a living heart. Most disturbing of all, it was actively scanning the New Horizon with some kind of energy beam. "Captain," called Lieutenant Tony Garcia from the communication station, "I'm picking up life signs from both ships. The smaller vessel has maybe 50 beings aboard, all showing extreme stress indicators. The larger ship has thousands of life forms, but the readings are strange." Nina moved to look at his screen. The bio readings from the large ship showed massive collections of different species, all grouped together in small spaces. The pattern looked like livestock being held in pens. "Open a channel to both ships," Nina ordered. Standard first contact protocols. The response came immediately, but not from the ship they expected. The large vessel sent a message that made everyone on the bridge feel cold. The voice was made up of multiple beings speaking at the same time, creating a sound like hundreds of people talking in perfect unison. "New beings detected. Biological analysis shows promise. Prepare for collection and processing." The smaller ship's message came through a moment later. The voice was weak and full of terror. "Run away, don't try to help us. They consume entire species. They have been hunting us for months." Nina's training told her to contact the Galactic Council and wait for official instructions. But her instincts told her something different. Every human instinct she had inherited from millions of years of evolution was screaming that innocent beings were about to die unless she acted immediately. "All stop," she commanded. "Battle stations." Her crew looked at her in surprise. The New Horizon did not have battle stations. It was an exploration vessel. But Nina's voice carried authority that made everyone move without questioning her orders. "Doctor." Kevin Hayes left his laboratory and came to the bridge. What he saw on the main screen made him forget all his scientific training. The large ship was launching smaller vessels toward both the New Horizon and the damaged ship. These smaller craft moved with mechanical precision, like insects swarming toward their prey. "Kevin, I need to know what we're dealing with," Nina said. "Full analysis of that ship and those attack craft." Kevin's fingers flew over his instruments. The readings he got back made his stomach turn. "Captain, that ship is a mobile processing facility. The organic-looking parts are actually biological systems designed for breaking down and consuming other life forms. Those smaller ships are collection units." Processing facility for what? For turning other intelligent beings into food. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Everyone on the bridge felt the same cold realization. They were looking at something that ate other sapient species. Nina felt something change inside her mind. It was like a switch being flipped, turning off the careful diplomatic thinking she had been trained to use and turning on something much older and more basic. Her ancestors had faced predators before. They had learned to fight back against things that wanted to eat them. Communications, send an emergency message to Earth Command, full data burst everything we've recorded. Navigation, plot a course that puts us between those collection ships and the refugee vessel. Engineering, I want every bit of power we can. Get to the shields and engines. Captain, said Commander Pat Wilson, her first officer, we're not equipped for combat. We should withdraw and wait for military support. Nina looked at him with eyes that had gone completely cold. Pat, how long do you think those refugees will last while we wait for help? Pat looked at the readings from the damaged ship. The life signs were getting weaker. Maybe 2 hours. And how long for a military response? Minimum 6 hours if we're lucky. Nina nodded slowly. Then we do this ourselves. She turned to address her entire crew over the ship's communication system. Her voice was calm and steady, but there was something in it that made everyone stop what they were doing and listen. This is the captain. We have encountered a hostile species that consumes other intelligent life forms. They are currently attacking a refugee vessel with 50 innocent beings aboard. The Galactic Council cannot help these people in time. We are the only ones who can save them. She paused, letting that sink in. I know this ship was not built for combat. I know we signed up for exploration, not war. But sometimes the universe puts us in situations where we have to choose between what's safe and what's right. I'm choosing to help those refugees. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle to the nearest station. I'll understand completely. Nina waited for responses. Not a single crew member requested to leave. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations to come. The New Horizon was not a warship, but it was crewed by humans. And humans had certain advantages that most species did not understand. First, they could function under extreme stress for extended periods. While other species needed rest or became paralyzed by fear, humans could keep working and fighting even when terrified. Second, they could coordinate complex group actions with minimal communication. Millions of years of pack hunting had given them the ability to work together like parts of a single organism. Third, they were incredibly good at adapting existing tools for new purposes. The New Horizons mining lasers became weapons. The cargo handling systems became missile launchers. The navigation deflectors became ramming shields. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was not pretty or heroic. It was desperate and brutal and chaotic. The New Horizon was faster and more maneuverable than the enemy ships, but they were outnumbered 20-1. Dr. Kevin Hayes found himself coordinating damage control teams throughout the ship. His gentle nature was still there, but now it was focused like a laser on protecting innocent life. He moved through damaged sections of the ship with calm efficiency, saving wounded crew members and keeping vital systems working. Lieutenant Tony Garcia turned the communication arrays into electronic warfare systems, jamming enemy signals and disrupting their coordination. His hands never stopped moving as he fought a battle in the electromagnetic spectrum. Captain Nina Rodriguez stood in the center of it all, making decisions with the split-second timing of a predator that had learned to hunt in packs. She used every trick her ancestors had developed for bringing down creatures larger and stronger than themselves. Most importantly, she never forgot that the goal was not to win a glorious victory. The goal was to save the innocent beings on that refugee ship. When the last enemy collection vessel was destroyed, the New Horizon was barely functional. Half their systems were damaged. 12 crew members were injured. The ship's hull was scarred, with weapon impacts and radiation burns, but the refugee ship was safe. As rescue operations began, Nina realized that something fundamental had changed. Her crew had seen what humans could do when pushed beyond their limits. They had watched a science vessel become a warship through pure determination and adaptability. More importantly, the rescued beings had seen it too. Word would spread throughout the galaxy about the humans who had faced impossible odds to save complete strangers. The mask was completely off now. The galaxy would learn that humans were not the peaceful diplomats they pretended to be. They were apex predators who had chosen to protect the weak instead of preying on them. And that choice made them the most dangerous species in known space. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the first time in over 200 years. Every major species sent their highest representatives. The massive chamber buzzed with nervous energy as beings from across the galaxy tried to understand what they had witnessed. Videos from the New Horizon rescue operation played on screens throughout the chamber. The footage showed a human science vessel fighting against impossible odds to save complete strangers. It showed humans turning peaceful equipment into deadly weapons in a matter of hours. Most disturbing of all, it showed humans working together, with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Ambassador Jake Morrison was no longer Earth's representative. He had been recalled to help deal with what government officials were calling the Revelation Crisis. In his place sat Ambassador Carol Stone, a woman with sharp eyes and silver hair who had spent 20 years in Earth's military before becoming a diplomat. The accusations began immediately. The Thraxian representative, General Salicor himself, stood up with his scales gleaming under the chamber lights, his yellow eyes fixed on Carol as he spoke in his booming voice. "The human delegation has deceived this council for decades," he declared. "They presented themselves as peaceful beings interested only in diplomacy and trade, but the evidence shows they are a warrior species with capabilities that rival our own." Murmurs of agreement came from several other delegations. The Corvin, insects clicked their mandibles in agitation. The crystalline Zelthani resonated with frequencies that sounded like breaking glass. Even the peaceful Kelvani chittered nervously among themselves. The Deep Dweller representative spoke through his water-filled breathing system, his voice bubbling with concern. "The humans destroyed an entire fleet of enemy vessels using only a science ship. This level of military capability should have been declared to the Council when they applied for membership." More accusations followed. Species after species stood up to express their concerns about human deception. Some demanded that Earth's membership be reviewed. Others suggested that humans should be classified as a potential threat species and monitored accordingly. Through it all, Carol Stone sat quietly at the human delegation table. She listened to every word without changing expression. Her hands were folded calmly on the table, but anyone who knew humans well would have recognized the controlled stillness of a predator deciding whether or not to strike. Finally, the council moderator called for the human response. Carol stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and confident. The chamber fell silent as she walked to the center speaking platform. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the vast space. "You want to know what humans really are. You want to understand how we could hide our true nature from this council for so long. I'm going to tell you the truth, but I don't think you're going to like it." She paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces watching her. Humans are persistence hunters. Do you know what that means? It means our ancestors survived by chasing prey animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. A human can run for hours without stopping. We can track wounded animals for days. We can coordinate complex hunts involving dozens of individuals working together toward a single goal. The chamber remained silent, but Carol could see understanding beginning to dawn on some faces. We didn't evolve as the biggest predators on our world. We weren't the strongest or the fastest, but we were the most stubborn. When a woolly mammoth injured one of our ancestors, we didn't run away. We followed it until it died. When other predators threatened our children, we didn't hide. We hunted them down and eliminated the threat permanently. General Salicor's scales rippled with unease. "What does ancient history have to do with your deception of this council?" Carol turned to face him directly. "Everything, General, because those hunting instincts never went away. Every human child learns about our past. Every human knows how to work as part of a team. Every human understands that sometimes violence is necessary to protect innocent life. She gestured toward the screen still showing footage from the New Horizon battle. Captain Rodriguez didn't have special military training for that situation. She had standard human education. Every person on that ship knew how to fight when they needed to, how to adapt tools for warfare, how to coordinate with their teammates under extreme stress. Dr. Amanda Foster, Earth's chief scientist studying alien psychology, stood up from the human delegation table. She was a small woman with kind eyes, exactly the sort of person most aliens thought of as harmless. The Galactic Council classifies species based on their primary evolutionary traits, she said in her gentle voice. Herbivores, carnivores, scavengers, parasites, but humans don't fit neatly into any category. We're omnivores who became apex predators through intelligence and cooperation rather than physical advantages. She activated a holographic display showing human evolutionary history. Our ancestors hunted in coordinated groups. They used tools and tactics that required complex planning and communication. Most importantly, they could adapt their hunting strategies to any prey animal they encountered. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates began talking among themselves in worried tones. The Kelvani delegation squeaked in distress. The Zelthani crystals resonated with frequencies that sounded like fear. Captain Ryan Clark was invited to address the council despite his military position. He walked to the speaking platform wearing a simple uniform with no decorations. His scarred hands and weathered face told the story of someone who had seen real combat. "You want to know why we didn't tell you about our capabilities?" he asked, his voice cutting through the nervous chatter. "Because you never asked the right questions. Every human knows basic survival skills. Every human can fight if they have to. Every human understands pack tactics and group coordination." He looked around the chamber at the worried alien faces. "What you call military training, we call elementary school. What you consider advanced tactical thinking, we consider common sense. The reason Captain Rodriguez could turn a science ship into a warship is because any human could do the same thing if they had to." General Salicor stood up again, his warrior pride stung by the implications. "You're saying that every human is a potential soldier?" Ryan's smile was not friendly. "General, I'm saying that every human is a potential weapon. We're persistence hunters who learned to use tools. We're pack predators who developed language and technology. We're apex predators who chose to build civilizations instead of just hunting and killing." The silence that followed was deafening. Representatives began to realize that humanity's peaceful integration into galactic society had been like a pack of wolves choosing to play nice with a herd of sheep. Not because they couldn't hunt, but because they had decided hunting wasn't necessary. Carol Stone returned to the speaking platform for her final statement. "We didn't deceive anyone about our nature. We simply didn't advertise capabilities we hope never to use. Every species in this chamber has defensive abilities. Humans are no different." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The difference is that our defensive abilities were designed by evolution to hunt and kill other apex predators. We spent millions of years learning to bring down creatures bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than ourselves. Those skills don't just disappear because we wear suits and live in cities." The Corvin representative clicked his mandibles nervously. "How do we know humans won't use these abilities against council members?" Carol's expression softened slightly. "Because we chose to join this council instead of conquering it. We could have taken control of this galaxy centuries ago if that's what we wanted. Instead, we chose cooperation over domination. We chose to protect weaker species instead of preying on them." She looked around the chamber one final time. "Every human knows how to fight. Every human can kill when necessary. But we would rather build than destroy, rather create than consume, rather protect than prey upon others. That choice, more than any weapon or military capability, is what defines humanity." The session ended in confused murmuring as delegates tried to process what they had learned. Some species were terrified by the revelation that humans were apex predators. Others were relieved to finally understand why humans were such effective mediators and protectors. But all of them understood that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The peaceful species they thought they knew were actually the most dangerous predators in known space. And somehow, That made them feel safer, rather than more threatened. Because apex predators who chose to protect the weak were the most valuable allies in the universe. 6 months had passed since the Great Revelation at the Galactic Council. The galaxy looked the same from space, but everything had changed in ways that most beings were still trying to understand. Ambassador Carol Stone sat in her office on Earth's orbital station, reading reports from across known space. Piracy incidents had dropped by 80%. 3 different territorial disputes had been resolved through peaceful negotiation. Most importantly, no aggressive species had attempted any major military actions since the truth about humans became public knowledge. The door chimed softly, and Captain Ryan Clark entered. He had been promoted to admiral and now served as Carol's military advisor. His new position was symbolic rather than practical, since most problems were being solved before they reached the point where military force might be needed. The hegemony of Rix just announced their withdrawing from the Verdania system, Ryan reported. No explanation given, but our intelligence suggests they got nervous about potential human involvement. Carol nodded without surprise. The hegemony was a collection of aggressive species that had been expanding their territory for decades. They conquered peaceful worlds and enslaved the populations. Before the revelation, they had been planning to attack at least 6 different systems. Now they were retreating from conflicts they could have easily won. Any word from the Thraxians? Carol asked. Ryan's weathered face cracked into a small smile. General Salakor sent an official message requesting human military advisors to help train his forces in advanced tactical coordination. He wants to learn pack hunting techniques. This was perhaps the strangest development of all. The Thraxians, who had been testing human patience for months, were now among humanity's strongest supporters. General Salakor had spent weeks studying human military history and had concluded that humans were the most honorable warriors in the galaxy because they chose restraint over conquest. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Carol activated the communication system, and the holographic image of Admiral Nina Rodriguez appeared in the office. Nina now commanded the newly formed Galactic Defense Initiative, a joint military force that combined human tactical expertise with alien technologies. Carol, we have a situation developing in the Outer Rim, Nina reported. The Kelvani colony on New Haven is under attack by raiders. Local authorities are requesting immediate assistance. Carol felt the familiar shift in her thinking as her mind switched from diplomatic mode to tactical planning. It was the same mental change that her ancestors had experienced when switching from gathering food to hunting prey. How many raiders? She asked. Approximately 50 ships, mixed species. They've already taken control of the main population centers and are demanding tribute payments from the colonial government. Ryan moved to the tactical display and began pulling up ship deployment schedules. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency as he calculated response times and resource allocation. I can have a response fleet in position within 4 hours. Make it happen, Carol said. Then she paused, considering the broader implications. But keep the human ships in support roles. Let our alien allies take the lead on this one. This was the new strategy that humanity had developed. Instead of solving every problem themselves, they helped other species become capable of defending themselves. Human tactical knowledge combined with alien technologies and perspectives created something unprecedented in galactic history. The rescue of New Haven took place 3 days later. The response fleet included ships from 7 different species, all working together under human coordination. The Zelthani provided advanced sensor capabilities. The Deep Dwellers contributed mathematical analysis for optimal attack vectors. The reformed Thraxians served as the primary assault force, but everyone knew that the human ships were there as backup. If the mission failed, if their allies were overwhelmed, the apex predators would take over and finish the job with ruthless efficiency. The raiders surrendered without firing a shot. Dr. Kevin Hayes, now serving as Director of Interspecies Relations, published his breakthrough study on human integration 6 months after the New Haven incident. His research facility on Earth had become a center for understanding how different species could work together effectively. Kevin's findings revolutionized xenopsychology throughout the galaxy. Most predator species, he discovered, had evolved to see other creatures as either prey or competition. Cooperation between different species was extremely rare in nature. Humans were different. Their pack-hunting instincts had evolved to include the ability to recognize and cooperate with other predator species when it served their purposes. Early humans had learned to work with wolves, turning potential competitors into hunting partners. This same flexibility allowed modern humans to extend their pack mentality to include alien species. Humans don't just see other species as allies, Kevin explained in his published paper. They see them as potential pack members. This is why human-led military operations are so effective. Every alien participant becomes part of the human pack structure, benefiting from millions of years of evolved coordination instincts. The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, different species could work together with the same efficiency that members of a single species achieved among themselves. The test of this new cooperation came when the Vorthak returned. The hive mind species had spent months rebuilding after their defeat at human hands. They returned with a massive fleet, determined to resume their harvesting of sapient species. Intelligence reports suggested they had over 300 ships and had developed new weapons specifically designed to counter human tactics. Admiral Nina Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her flagship Defender, watching the enemy fleet approach through hyperspace. Around her, the largest military force in galactic history waited for her orders. Ships from 23 different species had volunteered to join the defense fleet. But the most important element was not the number of ships or the variety of weapons. It was the way every crew member, regardless of species, moved and thought like part of a single organism. Human pack instincts had been transmitted throughout the fleet, creating a level of coordination that the hive mind Vorthak could not match. Theory. Battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Vorthak fleet had been completely destroyed. Not a single civilian had been harmed, and the defending fleet had suffered minimal casualties. More importantly, the victory had been achieved through cooperation rather than conquest. Every species in the defense fleet had contributed something essential to the victory. The humans had provided tactical coordination and strategic planning, but they had not dominated their allies. As news of the victory spread throughout the galaxy, something remarkable happened. Species that had been enemies for centuries began asking for human mediation in their conflicts. Aggressive empires voluntarily reduced their territorial claims. Peaceful species started forming mutual defense alliances under human guidance. Ambassador Carol Stone stood before the Galactic Council 1 year after the Great Revelation, delivering her annual report on the state of galactic civilization. The chamber was fuller than it had ever been, with representatives from over 200 species in attendance. 1 year ago, this council learned the truth about human nature. She began. We are apex predators who evolved through cooperation and persistence rather than individual strength. We are hunters who learn to work in packs, and we have extended that pack mentality to include every species willing to work with us. She paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of beings who had once feared humanity and now sought their protection. But the most important thing you learned is that being an apex predator is not about dominating others. It's about taking responsibility for the safety and welfare of your pack. The galaxy is our pack now, and we will defend it with the same determination our ancestors used to protect their families. The applause that followed came from beings who finally understood what they were applauding. Not sheep who had learned to pretend to be wolves, but wolves who had chosen to guard the flock. In the years that followed, the phrase human intervention became synonymous with swift, decisive action to protect innocent life. Pirates and raiders learned to avoid any system under human protection. Aggressive species found their expansion blocked by coalitions of peaceful worlds backed by human tactical expertise. The galaxy had indeed learned too late that humans were apex predators disguised as diplomats. But in learning this truth, they discovered something far more valuable than they had lost. They found protectors who would fight to the death to defend those too weak to defend themselves. And in a universe full of dangers, that was the most precious gift any species could offer.